Good Sunday morning, Northeast Ohio, as we close out a week where we went as a country where we have only gone 3 times before, as the House formally voted to open an impeachment inquiry into President Trump's actions related to Ukraine. Again, this is like a grand jury hearing evidence. If there is a trial, that would be in the Senate, with the jurors being the U.S. senators. Ohio's 2 U.S. senators, Sherrod Brown and Rob Portman, were both actually down this road before. Both were in the House back in 1998, with Senator Portman voting to impeach President Clinton, Senator Brown to not. As you can imagine, 21 years later, their views on impeachment are different. As the House moves forward on impeachment, someone to watch will be Republican Ohio Senator Rob Portman. Portman pushed for the aid to Ukraine that is at the center of the inquiry, and when it was held up, he was the one who reportedly pushed the president to release it. Once it was, end of story.
In terms of it being a demand or a quid pro quo and so on, the aid went. Look, I've said very plainly, as you know, that it's inappropriate for the president to have spoken to a foreign government about his political opponent, period. And so I don't approve of that. But the question is that an impeachable offense?
Senator Sherrod Brown, in a word, says yes.
When a president of the United States holds up $400 million and tells another country who is going to get that money to fight the Russians that you're not going to get that money until you help my campaign, help me personally, that's impeachable. That's a breaking of federal law. Richard Nixon didn't even do that kind of stuff.
Senator Portman told me he believes we know what was in the call between President Trump and President Zelensky, and that's good. But
we don't know the full call, do we?
Well, I think we do. I mean, there is no verbatim transcript, I guess, of these calls, so you take the notes, but I don't think anybody has disputed that this is the nature of the call.
But the New York Times reporting in his testimony this week, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who was on the call, said he unsuccessfully sought to correct the transcript. In the end, Portman said the people will decide this in a few months.
So do you want to take this extreme measure of impeachment, which is basically saying, you know, forget what the people said in the election, we're going to remove a president from office, again, in the context of us already being in the election. And the money did go, and that was important.
And George Stephanopoulos will have more on this coming up on This Week. Well, Tuesday is Election Day, normally a low turnout election, but we will see pockets of heavier turnout where there are issues of local concern. One of those is expected to be Cleveland Heights. In Cleveland Heights, the question for residents is a matter of change. Signs lining the lawns urging the more than 32,000 voters in the city to either vote to keep or change the way they've governed themselves for 98 years. In brief, Cleveland Heights is a council manager form of government. That is, there are 7 part-time council members, all elected at large for 4-year terms. Those council members, though, hire a full-time administrator to carry out their policies and run the city on a day-to-day basis. The mayor is simply one of the 7 council members who is elected council president. Those that want to keep it this way say the manager is then insulated from partisan politics.
It's a very progressive, efficient form of government that has served this community well for 99 years and kept us out of all of the problems we typically see all around the county.
Opponents, though, say insulated equals unaccountable to the people, only to council. They want a so-called strong mayor form of government where a full-time elected mayor would serve in that role of chief executive.
We've had 98 years of no voting for leadership, and people are hungry for leadership here, and they want accountability. That's what they want. They want to vote for their leadership.
While it's called a strong mayor, what's proposed is actually a hybrid, because the charter question also allows that elected mayor to hire a full-time administrator.
We'll have a city administrator that runs day-to-day operations, so with the same qualifications as our current city manager. So really, it's the best of both worlds.
The Vote No side says it's not, arguing that administrator will have a much more diminished role with no accountability.
Most likely would come from somebody connected to the elected mayor and would not be answerable to the city council, just solely to the elected mayor.
And early voting continues today at your local Board of Elections from 1 to 5 p.m. Tomorrow, though, only from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Well, not all leaders are elected. Some are appointed, and some come from areas outside of government. The head of the Catholic Diocese of Cleveland would be one of those voices. In the 172-year history of the diocese, there's only been 11 of them. This week, we mark the passing of the 10th, Bishop Richard Lennon. When he came to Cleveland from Boston in 2006, the 59-year-old son of a firefighter had the experience of someone who had run a small parish for 15 years and run the nation's 4th largest diocese of Boston for 6 months following the resignation of Cardinal Bernard Law and the church sexual abuse scandal.
Hopefully some of my experience, though, from Boston, I will be able to, share that to maybe enhance what is happening here. And also to be able to say what some of the pitfalls were and not to go down those roads.
And the pitfalls to which he spoke he was about to face while acting on the recommendations of the 3 committees that had already been looking at consolidation of Cleveland parishes, a process he had just carried out back home.
In the reconfiguration in Boston, I mean, my home parish closed, and I was in charge of the committee.
In the end, around 50 Cleveland parishes were closed and 17 new merged parishes were created, something he acknowledged was painful but necessary.
So many significant events have happened in people's lives in a church building. I mean, that's where they may have been baptized, or they made their first communion. I know a lot of people are not pleased, and yet the vast majority, because of their faith, have continued on in new settings.
In December of 2016, Lennon announced his retirement, having been diagnosed with vascular dementia. He expressed his love for the people of the diocese, who we vowed to pray for daily.
In your kindness, I pray that you pray for me.
Bishop Richard Lennon looked at his time here on earth as just the beginning of his journey and playfully laughed at how a nun, prior to his installation, showed his family the spot below the Cathedral of St. John where Cleveland bishops are buried.
And she took them in here, and she said, and that's where they're going to bury him. That's your spot. No, I hadn't even taken over. And it was decided that's where I was going.
And that is indeed the spot where Bishop Lennon will be laid to rest following a funeral mass Tuesday morning at 11. With Democracy 2019, I'm John Kosich. Enjoy your Sunday.